Hello, my name is Tony. 2018 was 3 years ago now. Rollerball was a film released in 1975. It was one of those prophetic futuristic sci-fi movies. It was set in 2018. Rollerball got the future mostly wrong. Mostly. The future envisaged in Rollerball is one where giant corporations run the world and corporate executives are the societal elite, the ruling class. Below them are a sort of middle class comprised of sportsmen and celebrities and the members of their various cliques, and below them a type of working class drone, the lowlier strata who are just about getting by but not struggling too much. There is no more war, zero violent crime, no real poverty, a state of global equilibrium exists. Key to maintaining this equilibrium is a worldwide spectator sport rollerball, a violent gladiatorial team-based contest involving a large elevated circular track, like an Olympic cycle track but with added hazards. Some of the players are on motorbikes, the majority on roller skates. They wear padded protective clothing, crash helmets and gloves studded with steel spikes. A steel ball is fired from a cannon, and the objective is to take possession of the ball and land it in the opposing team's magnetic goal. To achieve this, almost anything goes. Extreme violence is the means to victory. The game is a vicarious outlet for violence and aggression for the spectators, and a testament to the futility of individuality. No I in team, pilgrims, as the saying goes. No one lives, works or operates for themselves, but for and as part of the whole. As a team sport, rollerball is designed to be the embodiment of this philosophy, sort of the flip side of Thatcherism, which was an insidious form of self-centered conservative fascism. This is more a fascist-communist hybrid, built on a foundation of capitalism and corporate dominance. I mean, can you imagine it? A world where minority groups control what you believe, think, consume, how you behave, what your values are, how you communicate, the media you can experience, who you can have relationships with, what information you can access, what opinions you can express, whilst all the time keeping you under surveillance to lesser or greater degrees and judging your every move. Sounds like a woke flake cancel culture utopia. I mean, that's just nuts, yeah? Isn't it? You can draw parallels with the modern world of today as you see fit. You don't need me to draw them explicitly for you. I'm just here to revisit a classic sci-fi movie of the 70s, and that's what I'm going to do. Norman Jewison was an A-list movie maker, a director with a somewhat eclectic taste in project choice. In the Heat of the Night was a brave and startling exploration of deep-fried racism in America's Deep South that remains one of the most progressive thrillers Hollywood ever churned out. Its power to shock still has significant potency today. For me, it represents his creative directorial peak. Some may disagree and point to Fiddler on the Roof, The Thomas Crown Affair, Jesus Christ Superstar, or even Moonstruck. Oh my god, not Cher. But not I. In the Heat of the Night is a stunner and his masterpiece, closely followed for my money by Rollerball. Gasps of astonishment from some quarters, no doubt, but I'm resolute on this matter. Rollerball, his first, last and only excursion into science fiction, is the second best movie in Jewison's portfolio, and as we proceed, I'll explore why I think this is. Some critics can be a bit sniffy about certain genres, horror and sci-fi being the most notable for snobbish marginalisation. Even when directors as lauded as Kubrick make their substantial contribution to both forms, there's a sense of, yes, well, whilst he is a genius, obviously he's really done himself a disservice lowering himself like this. I mean, horror, science fiction, not exactly cinematic art, is it, darling? Even though horror and sci-fi may be held in higher esteem these days, I still get the feeling that of all the movie genres, they're the ones which pull the least respect as art forms. Personally, I think it should be musicals and chick flicks, but there you go, that's just me. James Caan plays Jonathan E., a long-serving rollerball player, team captain of Houston, and a globally recognised superstar. Mr. Bartholomew, a very urbane and steely John Houseman, is the chairman of the Energy Corporation, the HQ of which is based in Houston. Bartholomew is the head honcho, the numero uno, the big cheese, and after Houston wins a rollerball match against Madrid, he tells Jonathan that a video special in his honour will be made and broadcast. Furthermore, during the broadcast, Jonathan is to announce his retirement from the sport. It's not a request, but as a sweetener, a generous pension package will be provided. Jonathan can't understand why he's been told to retire and is disinclined to comply. He tells Bartholomew he wants to see his ex-wife, Ella, Maud Adams, who was taken from him by a senior corporate executive some years earlier who wanted her for himself. You can do that in the future, apparently. A throwback to the days of medieval serfdom, wherein the lord of the manor had the right to procure and pork the wife of any of his tenants. His request is denied and Jonathan obsesses over Ella, watching a continuous video loop of some of their times together at his secluded ranch. In the dark as to why the powers that be want him to retire, and with his suspicions aroused, Jonathan starts to dig into corporate history, only to find all the books at the city library have been digitized onto a supercomputer and re-edited, censored, and rewritten to suit the agenda of the corporations. His ex-coach and friend, Cletus Moses Gunn, now an energy executive, warns him to back off and lets slip that the corporations are afraid of him. A rollerball game against Tokyo degenerates into a murderous bloodbath with deaths occurring, and Jonathan's teammate and friend Moonpie, John Beck, being battered into a permanently vegetative state. The executives have changed the rules of the game with the aim of forcing Jonathan to reconsider his decision. Houston still win and are set to face New York in the World Final. Bartholomew hosts a teleconference with all the chief executives, and it is decided that if Jonathan insists on playing the match against New York, it will be with no penalties, no substitutions, and no time limit, the aim being to ensure that he does not survive. In search of answers, Jonathan nips off to Geneva, where the world's central supercomputer, known as Zero, is situated. There he discovers that the computer's memory is corrupted, with whole centuries of Earth history and influential literary works missing. The corporations and their executives have been rewriting history to suit and erasing select bits of the past. Rewriting history and erasing the past. Cancelling things and people. Now, why does this sound faintly familiar? I wonder. Jonathan's ex-wife visits him and tries to convince him to retire. He realises she has been sent by the executives for this sole purpose only and proceeds to erase his once beloved video loops of her. Ultimately, the executives fear Jonathan is becoming bigger than the game itself, too much of an individual focus for people, and as the futility of individuality is their core mantra, they can't allow this state of affairs to continue. The stage is set for one more game of rollerball, where there may or may not be one man left standing amidst all the carnage and devastation, with the crowd chanting his name in an increasingly aggressive frenzy of adulation and praise. I mean, that would be a great ending, wouldn't it? Oh yeah, it would. Rollerball was a popular film with audiences. The critics weren't too sold, but for kids of my generation it was something of a cause celebre. Visually it looks like a lot of 70s sci-fi movies look when trying to be futuristic. That is, it utilises existing 70s architecture and furnishings modelled to appear futuristic, but very much still in and of the present time. Angular, shiny and bright, with an emphasis on stainless steel and plastic and luminous colours. Same applies to the fashions, the clothing. Looking back on it now, we know this isn't how the future got to look, or ever will look, because most of it is barely functional and sort of hard on the eye. Seeing it back then, one might have thought, well, I'd never wear anything like that, and one would have been bloody well right. The set design comes into its own in the rollerball games, the arenas, the triple thick perspex barriers, the roaring modified motorbikes, steel balls, glossy slippery surfaces, lens-flared spotlights, lovely stuff, and the violence of the game is glorious to behold, brutally delightful. The staging, camera work, choreography and filming of these pile-driving contests is truly special, all throttle and klaxon noise, bone-crunching physical contact and blood-stained chaos, with some terrific sound design to enhance the visuals. The matches are the set pieces of the film, and what great exhilarating set pieces they are. So much so that the story itself and the framing of the narrative surrounding the action suffers slightly. With echoes of Huxley's Brave New World, the points about corporate control supported through mood-enhancing narcotics, facilitating the ultimately docile and sterile existence of the populace in an emotionally neutered society are effectively made, as is the notion of a corporate ruling class that has reconfigured art, literature, history and technology to sustain the ongoing totality of its soulless regime. But when the film moves away from the rollerball arena, it can get a little bit, well, sluggish. Not in a fatally damaging way, not at all, but it does result in a bit of an itch in the viewer to return to the game for another fix of rollerball mayhem. That the rollerball players or rollerballers are depicted for the most part as steroidal jocks of limited intelligence, just happy and grateful to be in the position they're in, is no accident, because this highlights Jonathan E's individual difference. Although he appears a standard stereotypical American football hero type on the surface, underneath he's a bit more thoughtful, quietly anguished at the loss of his wife, melancholic in the emptiness of his life away from the rollerball arena, and with just enough imagination to start to question just what the hell is really going on. He is more of a distinct personality. Caan gives a cool, understated impression of a man for whom confusion, anger and defiance simmers away just below the surface. James Caan was a heavy hitter back then. He was a bit too subtle, too nuanced, too edgy to be pigeonholed as just another action hero movie star. He'd been in a few notable movies in the 60s, making his bones, but his major break came with his casting as Sonny Corleone in The Godfather. He can stand comfortably beside the like of Pacino and De Niro in the acting stakes, evidenced by his dramatic role as the addicted college professor in Carol Rice's The Gambler. Later, his career-defining role would come in Michael Mann's superb crime thriller Thief in 1991. Equally at home with comedy, action or drama, his talent had a rare flexibility. He skillfully steers Jonathan E. away from being a cardboard cipher into something more of a flesh and blood person, increasingly ill at ease in his own skin, struggling to come to terms with and understand his life situation and the world he lives in. John Houseman was primarily a movie producer who found himself a much sought after character actor from the 70s onwards. His performance here as Mr. Bartholomew is not much different from his performance in 3 Days of the Condor or St. Or Ghost Story. He always played a variation of the same character, a guy called John Houseman with an assumed name and a few tweaks here and there. But that's okay because he excelled at it, and is perfectly cast as the ruthless old corporate despot whose only objective is to maintain the status quo at all costs. Bartholomew has as little connection to humanity or humanitarianism as a scorpion. You're not gonna like him, which is as it should be. The concise and economical screenplay is by American novelist and writer William Harrison, adapted from his short story Rollerball Murder, and Andre Previn contributed compositions to the soundtrack. Most of the music is classical, notably Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. This piece had been used in other films previously, Sunset Boulevard, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Hammer's 1962 version of Phantom of the Opera. The film has been credited with inspiring one of the best Amiga games ever coded, the Bitmap Brothers Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe. I played it to death back in the day. If you can find a copy and an Amiga emulator, I'd recommend gamers give it a spin. It's terrific fun. Rollerball has some striking scenes which live long in the memory. Privileged, intoxicated revelers firing incendiary bullets at trees for amusement to see them catch fire and burn. A motorbike running over a rollerballer's face, a steel ball fired into a rollerballer's head as he lies unconscious in proximity to the cannon, Jonathan hitting erase on his wife's videos, and most memorably the closing moments. All great sci-fi movies end on an emotional money shot, like the original Planet of the Apes. Here Jonathan stops himself from killing his last remaining opponent with a steel ball, and instead, broken and bleeding, struggles to the goal and slams it home. He skates around the track picking up speed to the gradually increasing chants of the crowd. Bartholomew, fearing a riot, slips away, a rat deserted in the sinking ship. As the chants reach a crescendo, the camera freezes on Jonathan's bleeding face. The end. Fucking groovy. Rollerball is a film so much its own indelible thing you figure it will never be remade, should never be remade, but it was, in 2002 and directed by John Die Hard McTiernan. I'm pleased to say it was utterly terrible, a vapid, vacuous, young adult orientated teeny bopper slab of neon and plastic trash, an absolutely worthless crappy bauble, and one I hope has been consigned to the eternal oblivion it so richly deserves. It's not for me to tell you what you should do, only what I wished I would have done, which is avoid it like the proverbial plague. If you choose to watch it, you have only yourself to blame. The original movie, however, is just great. Director Norman Jewison's second best film, and I won't be moved from that opinion. Many thanks for your time and attention. It is, as always, appreciated. Meanwhile, here's a song called Wild Orchids.
Cultivate such things, they either do or they don't. Whatever the future brings, it either will or it won't. They will hold the strings to the heart, to the purse, commoners or kings, for better or for worse. Looking for an answer in her eyes, looking for a light that never dies. Still beneath the bruised November skies, wild orchids, looking for an answer in her eyes, looking for a light that never dies. Still beneath the bruised November skies, on the great well of now lies. You don't educate such minds, asking why, asking what. Whatever such reason finds, either is or is not. Those who lead the way demand faith, demand trust, that we live to see the day when it turns into dust. Looking for an answer in her eyes, looking for a light that never dies. Still beneath the bruised November skies, wild orchids, looking for an answer in her eyes, looking for a light that never dies. Still beneath the bruised November skies, on the great well of our lives. Looking for an answer in her eyes, looking for a light that never dies. Still beneath the bruised November skies, wild orchids, looking for an answer in her eyes, looking for a light that never dies. Still beneath the bruised November skies, on the great well